The scent of freshly brewed coffee swirled through the air as David Carter stepped into his own café, now disguised as a quiet, unassuming new hire. The uniform felt foreign against his skin. He had worn tailored suits for years, but today, he was just another employee, a nameless worker blending into the background. He adjusted his cap, letting his gaze sweep across the room. From behind the counter, Lisa Brooks moved with practiced ease, her bright smile reserved for customers while her coworkers received only sharp, impatient glances. On the surface, she was the café's model employee, efficient, charming when necessary, and always in control. But David wasn't here for the surface. He had received anonymous complaints about employee mistreatment, about missing cash from the registers, and about an atmosphere that had grown tense in his absence. Employees wouldn't talk openly, and managers brushed concerns under the rug. If David wanted the truth, he had to find it himself. Lisa barely acknowledged him as he approached. "You the new guy?" she asked, not bothering to look up as she counted change into the register. "Yeah," David answered, keeping his voice low. "Great. Just don't get in my way." She slid the cash drawer shut with a little too much force, then turned toward a waiting customer, her voice switching to its polished, customer-friendly warmth. David moved toward the storage room, observing as she worked. She was good, smooth in her movements, efficient in handling orders. But something felt off. A few minutes later, when she thought no one was watching, David caught her hand slipping into the register. It was a practiced move, barely a hesitation, just the quick, silent lift of a folded bill before the drawer shut again. A heartbeat later, she was chatting with a customer as if nothing had happened. David's pulse quickened. He had expected negligence, maybe even intimidation toward coworkers, but outright theft? He had trusted Lisa once, promoted her, gave her raises. Now, watching her steal from his own business, he felt a mix of anger and disappointment settle in his chest. He needed to be sure. Throughout the shift, David observed more subtle transgressions. A dismissive scoff at a struggling barista, a whispered insult when a junior employee asked for help, an intentionally botched drink that had to be remade. Each moment reinforced what he feared. Lisa thrived when no one held her accountable. By closing time, she lingered near the register again, glancing around. David, standing in the shadowed corner, saw her fingers twitch before she slid another bill into her apron pocket. She exhaled, smirking slightly as she turned away. David clenched his jaw. He had seen enough. Now it was time to act. David arrived early the next morning, slipping into his role as the quiet new hire. The cafe hummed with activity. Machines whirred, customers chatted, and employees bustled behind the counter. But his focus remained on Lisa. She greeted regulars with effortless charm, her smile bright and practiced. If he hadn't seen her the night before, he might have believed it. But now, he noticed the cracks, a cold sharpness in her eyes when no one was looking, the way her fingers drummed against the register like she was calculating more than just numbers. David had planned to wait, to observe longer, but an opportunity presented itself too perfectly. During a brief lull, he approached the register, setting a folded 20 on the counter. "Hey, Lisa," he said, keeping his tone light. "Someone left this on the floor near the door. Must have slipped out of a pocket." Lisa barely glanced at it. "Yeah, I'll take care of it." She snatched up the bill, turning swiftly toward the register. But instead of opening the drawer, she tucked it into her apron pocket, barely breaking stride before moving to fill an order. David felt his stomach tighten. No hesitation. No second thought. Just muscle memory. He let the moment settle before pressing further. "So, how long have you worked here?" he asked, feigning curiosity as he wiped down a nearby counter. Lisa glanced at him, her expression shifting to mild annoyance. "Too long," she muttered. "Not exactly my dream job, you know?" "Must be tough," he said, watching her closely. "Managing the register, handling money all day. Ever been tempted?" Her eyes flicked to him, sharp and assessing. For a second, he saw something behind them, calculation. Then, just as quickly, she scoffed. "What kind of question is that?" He shrugged. "Just wondering. Some places have cameras. Some don't." Lisa's jaw tensed. "You ask a lot of questions for a new guy." David let a slow smile spread across his face. "I guess I'm just interested in how things work around here." Lisa held his gaze a second longer, then turned away, dismissing him. But the tension in her shoulders betrayed her. She felt something was off. Good. By the time the afternoon rush hit, David had seen enough. The stolen bills, the sneers toward struggling coworkers, the the way she treated the cafe like her personal playground. He stepped away, pulling out his phone. It was time to end this. As the last customers left for the day, David cleared his throat. "Lisa, can I talk to you for a minute?" She barely looked up from counting the till. "Make it quick." David exhaled, steadying himself. Then he removed his cap. Lisa's fingers froze on the register keys. Her gaze lifted. Recognition hit like a slap. And for the first time, David saw something new in her eyes. Lisa's breath hitched. Her fingers curled over the register, as if gripping it could anchor her in place. But David saw the truth. She was unraveling. "You," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. David held her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Surprised?" he asked, setting his cap on the counter. His usual commanding presence settled over him like a second skin. He was no longer the quiet new hire. He was the owner, the man who had built this cafe from the ground up. Lisa's posture stiffened. I don't know what you think you saw, but I saw everything." His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the steel beneath it. The stolen cash. The way you treat employees when you think no one is watching. The arrogance. He exhaled, shaking his head. "And to think I once trusted you." Her eyes darted toward the door, as if considering an escape. But there was nowhere to run. The cafe was empty now, just the two of them. "I don't know what you're talking about," she tried, forcing a laugh. "You have no proof." David pulled out his phone, tapping the screen. A video played, clear as day, Lisa slipping bills into her apron, her eyes flicking around to make sure no one saw. Only someone did. Her face drained of color. David crossed his arms. "Want to try that again?" For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then, Lisa's mask cracked. Her shoulders slumped, and her bravado crumbled. I needed the money," she muttered. "Rent went up. Bills piled up. I didn't have a choice." David's expression softened, but only slightly. "You always have a choice, Lisa. I would have helped. I've helped employees before. But instead, you stole. And worse, you bullied people. Made them dread coming to work." His jaw tightened. "That's not just desperation. That's selfishness." Lisa swallowed hard, her eyes darting around as if searching for an argument that might save her. But there was none. David sighed. "You're fired." Her lips parted, but no words came. The weight of the moment pressed down on her. Finally, she nodded, her movements slow and defeated. David gestured toward the door. "Leave your apron, and don't ever step foot in this place again." Lisa hesitated, then pulled off her apron, dropping it onto the counter. Without another word, she turned and walked out, the door swinging shut behind her. David exhaled, running a hand over his face. This wasn't how he had wanted things to go. But it had to be done. As he looked around the cafe, his cafe, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would rebuild trust with his employees. He would make things right. And next time, he wouldn't wait so long to act. The cafe felt different the next morning, lighter, freer. Without Lisa's presence, the usual tension had lifted, and for the first time in weeks, employees smiled without hesitation. David stood near the counter, watching as they moved with a renewed energy, no longer bracing for sharp words or passive-aggressive glares. "Morning, boss," Olivia, one of the baristas, greeted him with a cautious smile. David returned it. "Morning, Olivia. How's everything running?" "Honestly." She glanced around before lowering her voice. "Better. It's peaceful." David nodded. He had expected that. Lisa's absence wasn't just noted, it was felt. The toxicity she had spread had seeped into every shift, every interaction. Now, the cafe finally had a chance to breathe. As the morning rush began, David rolled up his sleeves and stepped in to help. He brewed coffee, took orders, wiped down counters. Employees stole glances at him, hesitant at first, then slowly accepting. He wasn't just the boss observing from a distance. He was working alongside them, proving that this cafe wasn't just a business to him. It was a community. Around noon, Olivia hesitated before approaching him. "Can I say something?" David set down the milk frother and nodded. "Of course." She shifted on her feet. "It's just we all saw what Lisa was doing, how she treated people. But no one said anything because we thought nothing would change. That maybe you wouldn't care." She exhaled, as if shaking off an old weight. "But you did. You saw it. You fixed it. And that means a lot." David felt something tighten in his chest. Not guilt, exactly, but the realization that his absence had allowed Lisa's behavior to fester. He had assumed his employees would speak up if something was wrong. But fear had kept them silent. He wouldn't let that happen again. I should have acted sooner, he admitted. I won't make that mistake twice. From now on, if there's ever a problem, you come to me. No more looking the other way. Olivia's smile grew, this time full of trust. Got it, boss. The day carried on, and David saw the change, not just in the employees, but in himself. He had always thought leadership meant making the big decisions, running the numbers, ensuring profits. But today, he realized it was more than that. It was about being present, about listening, about standing up when it mattered. As he locked up for the night, he took one last look around. His cafe. His people. This was just the beginning. And this time he was ready.